Coming up on this episode of the Delta Huddle podcast.
It makes sense from every level to know the product in depth. And when you get started on a test, I dig my hands in, I just start using it because that's who's going to be testing it. And if I don't have that experience up front and I've played with it and using it, I can't effectively test it.
Hello and welcome to the Delta Huddle podcast by Centercode. I'm Stefan Stenrus. When it comes to writing the book on beta testing, there are a few people more qualified than Mike Fine. Literally, he actually has a book on beta testing. As senior test manager and co-founder here at Centercode, Mike has been in the industry for over 30 years, testing thousands of products ranging from network equipment and wellness apps to audio equipment and financial services. Mike is a fountain of knowledge, and during our conversation, we covered his time at Centercode, how the platform has evolved, his top tips for recruiting testers, and what you can do to get the maximum out of your project. Mike's enthusiasm and passion for testing really shows in this episode, and we were delighted to have him on the podcast. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Mike, thank you so much for joining us today on the Delta Huddle podcast. This year, you get to celebrate 22 years with Centercode, which is incredible. I was hoping that you might be able to take us back and talk about how you started with Centercode and how you got into testing.
Well, those are two different questions, so I'll try to keep them brief because they're very long stories, and you guys know I'm not known for brevity. So, prior to Centercode, I started off in beta back in 1993, 92. I worked as a systems engineer and worked with one of the quality teams deploying large companies. And so I was too technical, and I needed to be in engineering. So they did. They moved me into engineering, and I took over beta. And I started by myself, working for a company called Megahertz. And Megahertz got acquired by US Robotics, and they were so impressed with my beta skills, not to sound arrogant, but they gave me beta testing for all of US Robotics, which at one time was the largest motor manufacturer in the world. And then 3Com, the inventor of Ethernet, took over US Robotics, and I became their beta manager for the entire corporation. So in 2000, when the tech bubble burst, I had 9 employees, and I was running beta for the entire corporation on products ranging from rack mount, network servers and SIP systems and a variety of other things to the Palm Pilot and working on their communication tools. So I did, the gamut from all the way from something small to something huge, PCMCI modems and other technology. And I worked in engineering for that whole time. And I had a team that would quality debug. I actually hold 2 US patents for engineering designs. And when the tech bubble burst, I got a lot of headhunter calls. But one of the things that my company let me do, 3Com, a lot of people would leave 3Com and go to greener pastures, and they would call me up and say, "Hey, you're the only one who I know who knows how to do beta. Can you do it for us?" And 3Com was like, "They're going to give us money for you to run their beta?" I'm like, yeah. So I had a little company that I had built inside 3Com called Beta Test Services. And one of those companies was Ericsson. And then coincidentally, a guy named Brett Mossbrook called me when I told him that I couldn't do testing for him anymore because I was getting laid off. He connected me with the guys at Centercode. And he said, I know some guys who are trying to start a beta company. Would you like to meet them? And they had started back in May, and this was August. So I flew down and I met Rich, God rest his soul, and Luke and Nathan and Neil, and we met, and I came back and told my wife I wanted to do this, that I wanted to not get a paycheck and start a company with somebody. And my wife, super wonderful woman she is, said, yeah, it's your expertise. And that's how I got connected with Centercode. And then, I kind of co-founded the company. I brought all of our first clients, which were 3Com and Palm. our first paycheck was from Palm, and it's because they knew me, and I called them up and said, "Hey, I got a new gig, and I'm doing my own thing," and they said, "Yeah, okay." And so then I brought in Omega and a bunch of other smaller companies, pretty big at the time, and then
Yeah.
I got us some money, and then still here doing it after all these years.
Very nice. Yeah, I think I remember back in the late 90s having like an iOmega zip drive on a desk for an iMac. So that hearing that name brings back some memories. And I think it's always cool hearing from someone who's been at the ground floor, where it's like, you've been here really since the start, and, seeing the journey of Centercode since then. And I'm sure you've worked with a multitude of different products and clients since then. Can you give us an idea of some of the different people and some of the different products you've had the pleasure of testing and beta testing?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's it runs the gamut. We have been in business so long. We've done some video game testing. We did Area 51, which was kind of fun. Yeah, that game got like a revamp a few years ago, and it was kind of funny because we had beta tested the version. We tested some crazy high-end networking equipment, which was just there. I worked with Seagate. I worked with, that's one thing that's fun about our company, is that we have always, the process and our software applies to everything. It doesn't matter what the product is. So we get the gamut of whatever choices. And that's one of the reasons why, when I moved out of management a few years ago, I went back to just testing. It's just because that's what makes my job enjoyable. I wake up every day and we're testing a new product for exercise right now. And then right before that, I'm testing for a shipping company. And then my next meeting is for a point of sale system. I mean, it just doesn't matter what the product is. Our practices and product work amazing with any product. So it's what's fun about my job is that I never know what's going to come in the queue in the next couple months. It's like, oh my gosh, look what I got. And because of my tenure and because of my years of experience and the fact that I wrote a book on beta testing, they always give me the worst projects, the ones that are going to be and when I mean worse, in the sense that they're not going to be easy to accomplish, they're kind of different and challenging. And so, that's kind of one of the fun things about what I get versus everyone else. Everyone else, if it's a brand new set of state-of-the-art headphones, there's no problem testing that because everybody wants to test that. But when someone needs to test a new accounting system, guess who gets the phone call? It's going to be me, because it's going to be challenging to find testers, people who are going to do it well, and that kind of thing.
It's such a draw, and I got pulled into Centercode the same way, in terms of, I don't think there's a company that I could have worked for that I got to see as many products being built. Right, like you get to see so many things from so many different companies, and you get to deal with the product managers at all these different companies coming with these great ideas, and that's what drew me into it. Now, I got a question for Mike. Why beta testing? What is the drive towards beta testing? So, having written a book and basically pioneered a lot of the industry, what's the draw to it?
Well, for me, what drew me to it and why it was interesting to me is because, as you know, I'm very social, but I have an engineering brain. And the bridge between listening to people who are normal people who buy things off the shelf and bringing them in and incorporating that into a product, to me, was the most critical thing in the world. Yeah. So when I got brought into, from the systems engineering standpoint, what was very exciting to me was I would meet customers and I would set up these huge systems and modem in there, and I'd spend time with the customers because I'm a people person. I like to interface, but then I would hear feedback from them about the product, and it got me very interested because, you know, somebody who, like, one of my first clients was Hershey Chocolate, and they were buying thousands of modems from megahertz, and I was sitting there configuring all these systems. And they were like, you know what, we really would like it to do this and do that. And then I was like, wow, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so I took that feedback to engineering and I turned it in and I wrote all of the details and I did my analysis and engineering brain to it. I said, you know, this is how it would be applied. And that got me excited to think that there are people out there who have a need, but how does product managers don't always get that connection, right? So that's what got me excited about it. And then when the opportunity came to be the manager of it for Megahertz, I said, yeah, I mean, I love that. I love the idea of listening to somebody who doesn't have an engineering brain, who isn't technical, and taking that data and putting it into the product, because at the end, that circle is what creates successful products. If a product has what the customer wants, the customer buys the product. So, and so from that standpoint, it's what excited me about it from early on. And then when I got into engineering, I kept seeing the lack of people listening. And I think it goes back to my documentation days too. You know, when I was writing manuals at iOmega, my previous job, you know, one of the things I learned to write better manuals, I'd read the support tickets that came in to see, you know, what people were information they were trying to find. And that whole thing just started to connect in my head.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that connection is something that's really powerful for me as well, being able to get the user or the consumer so close to the process of actually building out the product and ideating and, you know, kind of walking alongside the development team. Like, that's super important. And one of my favorite parts of Centercode is the fact that we call that layer the community, because that's really what it is, right? You really are bringing the community into, you know, kind of like opening the doors. I think we had one guest on the podcast who said it was like bringing people into the secret circle. It's like, yeah, you get a peek inside of how we actually do this. And speaking of that, you know, talking about testers specifically, I wanted to ask you, you know, what makes a good tester? Is it something that's test specific, or are there universal traits that kind of carry over no matter what project we're running?
I think that question is easy to make very complicated, but it's actually very simple. It's energy, enthusiasm, and accuracy. If they do those three things, if they're energetic, you know, they're there for the test, they're enthusiastic about what they're doing, and they're accurate, they take the time to share accurate data with us, everything else is gravy. It makes it easy for us because we get testers of varying degrees of energy. Some people are very low energy. They just, they do the minimum, and, you know, that's great. But, you know, they're fine, but they're not people who are going to be seeking out again. Enthusiasm is the difference between someone writing a couple words and someone writing me 3 paragraphs. There's a balance in that. Obviously, the 3 paragraphs makes it a little hard to read all of that, but at the same time, we appreciate that, and good feedback is always useful. And accuracy is just people paying attention to the details, you know, giving me the information. That's what makes a great tester to me. If you have those 3 traits, you're a slam dunk for me every time.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's something to it, because I've seen Mike over the years running tests, and his testers love him. He gets compliments all the time from testers saying how great of a manager was and how well he responded. And I think there's something to that energy, that enthusiasm that you're talking about, because as a test manager, you are emoting some kind of energy. Like, if you're listening to testers, if you're giving them the attention that they are seeking in part of test, I think you're kind of injecting some enthusiasm, a little bit more motivation into those testers. And I want to hear some Mike tips on how am I, a beta manager, going to get these people excited, hyped up, and start that test really strong and excited?
That is a great question, and it is something that is sometimes it's self-propelled. So, like I mentioned, like a very high-end headphones or a new streaming device or a video game, that energy is already there. You can tap it. But when you get into projects that the product isn't necessarily as exciting, or something that people aren't, like, chomping at the bit to test, but that's where what you capitalize on is the exclusivity of that test. And what you do is, one of the things I always teach, I have an analogy, I've told this 1,000 times, and I call it the country club versus health club mentality. So when you create a test, anybody can join a health club, right? You get paid $20, you join, you're in. Country clubs require you be invited. You have to have you have to commit to participating in it, like go to their restaurant and play golf and tennis, and you have to say, I'm going to be a member of this club. And I've always wanted us to get that kind of enthusiasm, people who are committed to our projects are committed from the very beginning. We set that sense of exclusivity, and that's what gets them excited. They're like, you touched on it a second ago. It's like seeing something that no one else is getting to see, to be in that inner circle, that community. Having that opportunity is a huge advantage. And then also you have someone listening to you, which I always capitalize on. Like, you have the engineering team of the company you're testing for sitting there, cares about what you have to say. I can tell you, I got 2 kids. They don't listen to me. So it's nice to go to work and go out here and have the kids have someone listening to you and saying, oh my gosh, I care about what you think. And that's always nice. And then I think the last thing, and by the way, my kids sometimes listen to me, but, and then the last thing is, I think what also just helps motivate people is appreciation. Just like you're saying, I take the time to capitalize on that energy and enthusiasm. And we say thank you on every post. We listen to what they write. If you go look at any of my posts on any kind of test I do, I literally will read every single comment, and I write responses that are in direct response to that, because obviously if I'm listening, I'm responding to those to those comments and showing that I've listened, not just boilerplate responses. And I think that's why Centercode is successful with a lot of companies, because they don't have the energy to do that. And our CPM team is good at doing that and making sure that people are being listened to. And that's central to success of any project, is having that response to your testers so that they know that what they're doing is worthwhile and useful to them.
Absolutely. And so those are all your testers that you've already picked out for your projects and whatnot. And hopefully, you found the ones that are really enthusiastic. Do you have any particular strategies for finding those quality testers who do have that enthusiasm and energy and accuracy?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So some top level tips that are really effective. First of all, how they fill out your application is a big tell, as they say in the poker world. If they type in 2 words saying, pick me, that's probably not going to be your best tester. They're not really showing that. But if they tell you on your application, I use your product every day, I love it, but I have these issues, that's a person you're like, oh yeah, that person is interested in testing. There's obviously the boilerplate demographics that you have, age and things that you need to find, but how people respond on that form is very central. We also sometimes look for people who what they own and other things they register in our surveys and tell us, because sometimes those are key things. Like if you're looking for someone to test an accounting software, you're going to go look at what their job is and what they do and how they do their job. So some of those things are matching it, but also you might want to look at what position they're in that. And one of the best testers I ever had, he was a support guy for an entire university. He was one of their top support people. And so he was supporting all these different applications. And so I knew that if he was taking time to sign up for these betas, that he was going to be somebody who really wanted to share feedback, because he's using these tools on a regular basis. And it's that kind of thing. You need to have a little 3-dimensional thought. And I think the last thing that I always focus in on is responsiveness. Like, when I give them something, how quickly they come back to respond. So if I put in an NDA request, or get me your address, or fill out some forms, if they're doing it in the next, they do it in 15 minutes, I know they're interested and they're motivated. So it adds up very quickly to show me that, they've done all these other things and here they are responsive. They're ready to go. And so that's a great tester. And we have very high success rates at Centercode. We always talk like 90% and that kind of thing. And that's a big deal, but we shoot to get 100% engagement on every project, because we do have a good selection methodology.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question for you in the same vein of testers is, how do you determine how many testers you actually need for a project? Is that something that you work out with the client that you're working with there, or is it something that's more kind of defined before you even get to the point where you're involved with the test?
Actually, both. So if it's undecided, the mathematical formula depends on the type of product. So if you're testing cars, obviously you can't give 30 cars away. But if you're testing
maybe
software,
depends on the company.
I've been wanting to test for Alfa Romeo for a long time.
I was just going to say that, yeah.
But we got the Ferrari lineup over here. We'll be testing. On the other side of that, but yes, when you get into like something like a mobile app where you have unlimited numbers, you could literally do it. And there are tests that we call a public test that you can literally have thousands on it. Different strategy though, and a different kind of test. But the ideal number really fits into the demographics that you're picking. It's kind of a complicated formula. The simplest way I think I can boil this down for people who are trying to make that decision is your individual resources. You have the ability to manage feedback. Remember, it's the old grain of rice thing. Every time you add another tester. So if you have 10 testers and each of them turn in 2 pieces of feedback a day, that's 20 pieces of feedback a day. If you can't digest 20 pieces of feedback a day, you're going to have over a 2-week period of time, you're going to have a lot of problems. So you need to balance the amount of feedback. And also, we don't deal in numbers as a statistical significance because, you'd have to get thousands and thousands to be able to make differences. But if you have a demographic like, gender and income and location and kinds of things that your product is targeted for, then in that situation, you will want to make sure your group is reasonably large so that you can show that the data is reflective of what you think will happen. And we do find in our tests, it's very often very reflective of what's in the field. In fact, one of my clients recently took the scores that they got on our test and compared them to the consumer scores that they received, and they absolutely matched within a couple points of NPS scores.
Wow.
It was pretty close. And so, again, doing the right numbers and doing that kind of thing, it's a little different for every product. And, we spend a lot of time consulting to give you the best advice on that. But what I would say is that if you're running your own tests and you're using our software, best to start small. Then if you feel like you can handle more, then you can always scale up and add more testers and grow.
Yeah. Lindsay Brown, our last guest, made a really, really good point about that, where she said that, a test may only have 50 people in it, but that 50 people could represent 50,000 people. So she really stressed the importance of making sure that you have those quality testers in there and whatnot. And
right.
Sorry, Chris, you were going to say something. Didn't mean to steal your thunder right there.
I mean, it's like Mike wrote the book on it or something. But when you think about those testers, I love one piece that he talked about, because we have a calculator online. We have a lot of resources to help you identify how many testers you should have. But one thing that people don't always think about is how many can I support. So like Mike pointed at, like, oh yeah, if maybe you want 10,000 testers, like, yeah, good luck managing 10,000 testers. It's not fun. I've had customers come to us and say, hey, my management wants 10,000 people in this test. How do I tell them no? And it's like, explain how much it's going to take to support that many testers, right? So like, for people out there that are listening, that are trying to identify how many testers they need, think about the team that's supporting them and what they can actually handle as well. Because if they can't handle that quality or that quantity, they're not going to get quality out of it, right? So the more people we have available to us, we're going to start skimping on some quality things. We're not going to be responding like Mike's saying. We're not going to see good engagement rates because we can't keep up with everybody, and it's just going to kind of fall off. But if you got a team of 10 people that's supporting a couple thousand person test, you may be suited for that. So it's very dependent on your company's needs and how you can support those tests.
And the stability of the product. I mean, if the product is in a really strong position and it's a great product and it works really well, then 10,000 might not be a big deal because you're going to get, just a few bugs here and there. If your product is not in that state, you could be, I like the expression from the old UHF movie, drinking from the fire hose.
Yeah.
Great visual.
It's all coming out at once. Yeah. So
exactly. Too much to take.
Too much to handle. Yeah. Last question I want to ask about testers before we move on a little bit. What is your advice to someone who's maybe struggling to find testers or struggling with recruitment? Maybe they're outlining, we need 50 testers and they only find 20 or so people who are interested. What's your advice on that?
Well, one of the things I always say is go back to your product. First of all, if someone's not finding testers, there's a lot of potential problems there. I mean, they could be, they're not going to the right source. They're not going to the right, like they're not using their social media correctly. They're not communicating it effectively, or the message they're giving might be terrifying. I mean, I've seen beta announcements that, list the 6,000 things they want you to do during your beta. I'm like, I'm not signing up for this. It's take me for the rest of my life to get this done. And then, or on the other side, it says, sign me up for beta, without giving any kind of information on what that means and what that translates. So obviously the message is really important. And where you're pointing that message is important. One of the things that I find, if you're not using our beta bound resource, which is available to our customers to help you recruit, then if you're trying to do it yourself, your best pool are going to be people who are in your support database if they've had help, because they probably have had issues with your product, and they're probably using your product because they paid for it. And so they'll be excited about it. Another tool, again, we have so many tools out there, Reddit, all these great social media tools. But one thing that a lot of people don't recognize is that your support team talks to the customer all the time. So again, there are avenues inside of your own company, your marketing organization, and where they're communicating things. You've got lots of tools at your hand. The other thing too, that what I really try to emphasize with people is it's not about getting the message out. It's more about getting the message in. And what I mean by that is when you say getting the message out, that's like you're splashing. Don't sell your beta program like it's a fun. It goes back to what I was talking about, country club and exclusivity. If you go out there, we want beta testers, sign up. You're going to get the people, you're going to get coupon cutters, as we call them, people who are looking for free stuff but aren't really motivated to test. You don't want to be shouting out to the world. What you want to do is you want to have invitations. You want to invite people. You want them to come into you with a motivation to test. And so when you want to find good testers, you have to find people who are there for you, not for themselves. And that is really where it's critical. And by using messages that are, express exclusivity, talk about how being a beta tester is a benefit to them, by being a part of the team and helping improve the product that they use and love, then suddenly you get the right people. So you don't necessarily need to have the large quantity, but you'll have the right people who are applying. And that's more important than anything.
Yeah, I'll second that, Mike. I did a post on LinkedIn a couple weeks ago. I think maybe it was like 2 weeks ago. I was consulting with a company. It was a startup. They're looking for users, and they have a hard time getting beta users. They tried, they did their outreach. And I feel like a lot of companies try this, like, I just need to get just a couple hundred people and I'll be cool. And they're thinking that one message that they're putting out is going to like attract all these people. And a lot of times it doesn't work that easily unless you have a big brand that everybody knows about and they're so excited about it. One thing I recommended was, like you mentioned, a Reddit community, right? So go to where your users are. Meet them where they're at, where they're living, where they're breathing. So if you've got a fitness app, you're in a fitness community talking with them. And really, you only need a handful of people. You need to build a couple good relationships with people and then look for referrals and have them kind of spread that word of mouth. I think word of mouth is so vital in these programs, especially that are aiming for niches that are a little bit harder to obtain. And that's tend to where people kind of fall out. Is I have a startup, I have this product, it's cool, it solves this problem, but I can't get people to it. It's like, yeah, those people aren't necessarily looking for you because they don't know that solution exists. So you need to find people with that problem, talk to them, and then they might make some recommendations for you. They might say, hey, yeah, I got a group of people back here on this Facebook group that has this exact problem, and now you have 10, and they may have some people that they know, and it's just like, bam, you're looking at a nice little network of people to get some testers.
Absolutely. And I think the thing too, you make a really great point, which is that, like I was talking about coupon cutters, there are people out on the net. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, everybody likes free stuff. I think that's kind of what's happened with beta testing in the last few years is some of it's gotten diluted where people think that's what it's about, is about getting freebies and getting lots of you get a great, cool product if you do this, or money, or, like some of like other organizations that pay testing, and truly, if you're doing your testing right, the people who are coming to you, they're not motivated by those things. They're motivated. And again, I want to emphasize, there's nothing wrong with getting free stuff. I like free stuff just like the next guy. But we don't want people coming to the table to us who are there because they want to get a free product. We want people coming to the table because they genuinely want it. So to your point, If you get somebody in your community who's talking it up and in there or complaining about something or really engaged in your product, that person cares about your product and wants to see it as success. They don't like having a product that doesn't do what they want it to do, and that's why they're there chatting it up. And to that point, that person is your best advocate for getting other people to jump on board, because they're going to know other people like, yeah, I agree with you. We need this. And the next thing you know, you got 25, 30, 50 people who want to play.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of great wisdom there. So thank you, both you guys, for, expounding upon that. Just trying to find the right word. But going a little bit back earlier in the podcast, Mike, you said that oftentimes, if there's kind of a unique product or a little bit of a tricky project, it's usually like, let's call Mike, because he's going to be the consummate professional and he's going to be able to tackle it no problem. What are some of your strategies when you first, get into a new project for the first time?
Well, no matter what kind of testing you do, and I preach this continuously, know the product. You can't run a good test, whether that's an alpha test, whether that's a beta test, whether that's any automation testing. That doesn't matter what kind of testing you're doing. You need to have a deep understanding of the product. And when I don't know if you guys saw the other day when we mentioned that we're testing a new product for an exercise equipment. And, I just went out and bought one. It was a lot of money, but I wasn't going to test a product that I can't physically see it and use it, because that's not a commitment to the... Now, I don't do that every time, but if the customer can't provide me a product to interface with it, it makes sense from every level to know the product in depth. And when you get started on a test, I dig my hands in and I just start using it, because that's who's going to be testing it. And if I don't have that experience up front and I've played with it and using it, I can't effectively test it. And, sometimes those things are things that I don't necessarily have an immediate interest. I may not be excited about, testing every product that I get, but I still go and use it. And then I find something great about it or interesting or fun. I try to keep my curiosity piqued about anything. If I test for a shipping company, I don't ship every day, but I know what shipping is, and I do ship things. So then I just try to find something interesting about it to pique my interest, so that I want to spread my hands around it and mess about and look at it. So then when I get ready to write a test plan and I design a project and I think about it, I understand what the issues are that people are using and what they feel about it. And then from that is the best launch pad to getting there. And that can burn you a little bit. Sometimes people get a little too close to the product. Sometimes they're deeply invested in the product, like if you've developed your own product and you're trying to test it. So sometimes you might need to have somebody help you step outside if you're too invested in it. But you definitely need to understand it really well, so that you can, even if you're fully invested in that deep into it, you may want to temper your things, because you have to remember not everybody's going to be that in depth with you. But your project will always be a success if you understand and embrace the product you're testing.
Yeah, I think I'm starting to see the blueprint for an amazing beta test manager here, is to have the deep understanding of the product and really caring about it, but also having that ability to listen to the testers and really get what they're saying as well. And being able to get that message to the stakeholders too, right? Like you just mentioned, sometimes you need that person who's a little bit outside, who still cares, but is not so deeply invested that, they see an issue and they recoil, right? They're like, oh, I just don't want to look at it. So what's some of your advice for kind of getting that message to the stakeholders, to the people who are developing the product?
Absolutely. I learned this lesson really, really, really early on. I made a lot of mistakes over the years. I'm normal and human, and that's part of why we test, because it's making mistakes and fixing them. But years and years ago, I had a guy, I came to him and I told him, we need to make this change. And he said, where's your data? And I said, what do you mean? He goes, is this your opinion or is this fact? And he went, I sat there and I went, I guess it's my opinion. I don't have any data here to support it, but I'm seeing it in this and this and this. And he goes, well, come back to me when you got the data. And I took that mantra and I live by it every day. If I have testers showing the data, this is the data. It's not emotional. It's not a personal opinion. If I have 20 testers saying this is a problem, whether you believe it's a problem or not, it's a problem. And I speak with data. And speaking with data is objectively the only way you can get that message across to people who might be resilient to change. And if they're resistant and they're fighting back and they're pushing back on you because they think, oh, this is not really a bug, or it's not that serious, or we can address it, or whatever, that's their decision. I also have a little mantra that I learned from Peloton, which one of the instructors always says this, and I've been living it now since I started getting the Peloton over COVID, which is, he says, I make suggestions, you make decisions. And that's the other thing. I love that, because that's really the way the world works. I can't make somebody, a stakeholder, make a decision that is something that I don't agree with. I can't make them do what I want them to do. So I'm going to give them the information, give them the data, make a suggestion, and then they can make those decisions themselves. But the ramifications of those decisions, and Centercode does such a great job of documenting everything. I mean, there's ways for people to click up and vote and add comments and show images and attach things. And that's where I take my job to heart. If I see a problem, I'm pushing testers to give me as much data as possible so that I can present that to the customer. Then they can't argue against it. They can do nothing about it. But then if the product ships and it goes out and they have that problem and they see it in the field, and they come back to us, Centercode didn't tell us this. We're like, yes, I did. It's right there in black and white. So, I don't encounter it very often anymore because of, I think most people who are coming into this mindset of testing, they want that data. They do. And as I've said, we've had a lot of startups over the years who sign up with us, and nothing makes me happier than to see them still in business and producing new products, because we helped facilitate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not one of our old podcasts. Man, we've been doing podcasting for a while.
It's coming up on a year, Chris, so we can start saying that, but go ahead.
I think he just had the last episode was the 10th, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of our old podcast episodes, we talked, because there's a fair amount of people that struggle with getting that stakeholder buy-in. So a company may say, yeah, you got to do beta tests. You do a beta test, but then you have a product person or a UX person or just some other team member who's a little like, whoa, I don't know about that. Like, let's not just, jump too quickly. Some of the advice was around ensuring you include those people in planning aspects. You don't need that many cooks, but you do need some influence. So getting ahead of anything that you're going to potentially run into is like hurdles. Like, for example, if they are going to fight saying this isn't the right user, this isn't the target market, make sure that they're in there early on saying who is the target market, making sure we're recruiting for those people. Absolutely. Making sure the tasks that we're asking and the questions we're asking aren't biased, because that's a huge danger in beta testing or just in product testing. Is if you have something that you're trying to get asked and you ask it the wrong way, it can kind of tank the results into your favor. It can mess with the data set, so you can bring data that's not actually factual. You just could be telling a story or a narrative that you like. So that's just some recommendations on the side of if you are struggling to get stakeholder buy-in, include them in planning, get them involved.
Absolutely. That's a great thing. And one of the things that, we don't get the privilege to decide who our customer is. In most part, we get them in there. It's whoever it is. And one of the things I really like to do is, and I always encourage on all of our teams, is involvement. I love clients who have 20 people on their email list when we start a project, that they want everybody in the process. And yes, sometimes, like you say, you get too many cooks and some people come in, and then there's always the internal politics and hierarchy of a business that can also throw some of those things off. But as far as I'm concerned, I like anyone listening. And if everyone's listening, that, someone's there going to pay attention, and we're going to get somebody who cares. So I encourage active engagement and involvement from as many people on any projects we run. And any project you're running yourself, if you have people inside, if your sales guy wants to be a part of it, maybe you don't let your sales guy talk to everybody, but if he has an interest, why not? Or she wants to be, or you've got your director of support, she wants to be involved, bring her in, let everybody in the door, because the more people that are involved, the more they care about hearing the feedback, the more they learn and contribute to each other. It helps validate the importance of the project.
Yeah, that transparency is incredible. And to use my trivia brain, Chris, I believe that was episode 8
with Joe Golly, who had that. So,
oh, really?
Yeah. Just pulled it out of my head. I was like, oh, I remember, we had a clip about that. So, we also talked about hurdles. Hurdles are a big one for any kind of project. And this is a question for both of you guys. What is, in your experience, what is the toughest part of any new project? What is that big hurdle that you need to jump over and clear before you can say, okay, everything else after this is more or less gravy? Like it's going to be a lot easier. Well, and we can start with you, Mike.
Yeah, well, from a objectively just project execution, there are certain things like legal is always a big one. Obviously, hardware, we have one of my favorite things, which is hardware cannibalism. Like you're going into beta, you have 100 units, and then, oh, I need this for a trade show. Oh, I need a demo. Oh, I want to give this friend of the president a unit. Next thing you know, you have 40 units, and then it's going down. And shipping and management of that also becomes a challenge as well. Those kinds of things. There's a lot of steps. And then last, all of those little things that take to get you to start the project, those are just things that we encounter almost on every test. We say, oh, yeah, we're going to need an NDA. And then all of a sudden the NDA goes, we're like, uh-oh, what's going on? I'm sorry about that.
Just letting you know someone's out there.
Yeah, someone violated the NDA.
Somebody filed the NDA. I got my West Highland Terrier going barking.
Yeah.
But and from a standpoint of like the bigger hurdles that come into play is development, which is just that the whole existence of creating a product. I don't know how many projects have slipped. I like to joke with every client who tells me that a project slipped. It's the first time I've ever seen it happen, because it literally happens every single project. Because you get there and then all of a sudden, oh, there's one more thing we have to fix. Feature creep, things like that. So those are the other hurdles you have to encounter. And so having what we call test viability, which means a product that's ready for customers to use, is a critical thing. And finding that viable window where it's ready to go, that's a big hurdle that a lot of clients encounter before they get started, because, drawing a line in the sand is sometimes very difficult, especially when it's something that's important to you and you don't want to go out with a bug that everybody knows exists, but at the same time, you don't want to hold up the testing. That's a big hurdle that a lot of our clients encounter. All of them.
Definitely. I'll give a slightly different approach, because Mike covers all this is what you're going to run into on a test, especially if you're not planning for it. I think one big hurdle that people are going to run into is challenging the fact that their beta is what they're going to get. So they've run a beta before, and this is beta. This is what they're going to do. They're using email. They're using spreadsheets. They get a little bit of survey responses. They get a few users in there. I'd say that the challenge there is that that's not all that there is. There could be something so much better in your beta. It's just you're not challenging whether or not it should be any better. Beta generates work. You find issues, you find things you need to improve on. And a lot of times, if you're in a weird space where you're not looking for more work, you could just be okay with the status quo and just saying, I'm just going to let this beta slide. I'm not really going to invest the time or effort into it. And that's going to generate all kinds of problems for you in the product. So it might make your beta easy, but it's not going to make your life any easier. You're going to launch the product and you're going to have support. You're going to have people returning products. You're going to get negative reviews, and that's going to cause way more of a headache. And future you is going to hate you for not thinking about how you could have knocked over these hurdles and put a little more effort in early. It's that ounce of prevention that can happen. And beta's that one step. It's your first launch right before you go out the door. So if you can nail this and do well, your future self will love you, and so will the rest of your company.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It should never be a problem for tomorrow me, right? Beta should always be a now thing. It's like, let's do it now. Let's just get it all sorted out and make sure it's solid. And then if we have to do that extra work, fine. We're going to save ourselves a lot of headache in the future. One last question on kind of project management. And again, I think we've had a lot of wisdom and, really great tips expounded here. But to kind of cap off, just managing tests, what's something that can really make or break a project? What's something that you just can't ever gloss over? You can't leave for a problem for, future me to solve later? What's something that just needs to be, foundational for a project to succeed?
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot of times, and obviously critical bugs are obvious. obvious, right? I mean, everybody knows if you find a bad bug, but it's actually the reaction to the feedback that is what kills your test. So it's very easy for people to find problems and then rabbit hole into those problems and then forget where they were and where they were going. And so let's say you make a widget and first weekend test, you find a critical bug from the widget. A lot of our clients will spend all of their energy and capital and time to address that one bug. And then they don't move forward and finish their test, or they slow down the test, or they put the test on hold, or they stop the progression. And one of the things that you need to learn, and for any successful project, is the people who are showing up for your test are volunteers. They've allocated time, they've allocated energy, they've allocated their enthusiasm, and they're going to be testing and going there. Unless the bug is literally setting them on fire, there's nothing that serious. There's things that, they can work around. Maybe you do a workaround, maybe you have to do it, but you need to keep that time. The analogy I use a lot is, beta testers have they're a car, and they have a certain amount of gas in the tank. And once the test starts, you're burning that gas. And if you don't get a chance to refill it before the end of that test, and there's some things you can do to, top off the fluids and get everything going, keeping it moving forward. But if you don't, you're going to burn them out, and then the test is over. And if you sideline them at the beginning because you're trying to address some critical issue, that car's still moving forward. They're still there. They're just going without you, and they're not doing anything. And then next thing you know, your test is over, and that capital is spent. You can't do anything with it. And we do our very best to, I know it's hard, and I get it. I get why people want to jump in and work on these problems, but it's not a fire. You don't need to put it out. It can burn. Move on to other things. Keep your project moving forward. If it's really that bad and you do have to stop it, we obviously have mechanisms to do that. But every day that you're diminishing the value of your test, appreciate the tester and their time and their energy, and you will always continue to get good feedback. And even if you can channel their energy on things that are not super important at the moment, but you can say, okay, hey, we got to deal with this, but then we can, let's work on this part of your product. No product is one dimensional. They all have multiple things, facets, whether that's user documentation, whether that's installation, drivers, pieces of the puzzle. And so just keep that energy going and don't do that, because that's what kills a test. Is I see this happen time and again where clients they lose their focus because they put their focus somewhere else, and their focus should be on making sure that test is a success, and then everything else will fall into place afterwards.
Yeah. You want to have the same holistic, viewpoint of the product that you want from your testers, right? Because if you had testers who were like, yeah, I got the headphones, but I only ever tested to see if it connected to Bluetooth, the project would not be so good. So
exactly.
Great advice there. Yeah. I wanted to reflect a little bit because you've worked on numerous tests, and like you said, you've worked with everything from network equipment to financial software to headphones to what have you. Do you have any favorite tests that you look back on and you say, yeah, that was a great test, or man, I really learned something from, running this project?
I don't, as a habit, talk about specific products because I love all my children. But so to be specific about one particular test, what I love about my job and what I love about Centercode is I learn something new every test. And even at my gray hair age and doing this for over 30 years, I still learn from new clients and different personalities and different products. And we're in an industry that's constantly changing and shifting. And what I would say is, if the one thing that's constant above all projects that I love and had favorites has nothing to do with the product, has nothing to do with the test, doesn't have anything to do with the testers. It's the clients, the ones that care, that are listening, that they want what we're doing for them. And those are the ones that stand out. I think about projects that I ran for companies that when we started this company, who were literally getting in their car and driving to testers so they could see what they were doing to solve a problem. That kind of stuff sticks with me. And those are my favorite tests, because those are the people that I worked with who genuinely valued the testing and the work we were doing. And that to me is what stands out. If I had to name one name, it's been 30 years, Kodak. I mean, these guys, they're not around anymore, but in a bigger form. But back in the day, they were making printers and we were testing for them. And these people literally drove the entire West Coast, one place at a time, to see these people install printers so they can make a better printer. And that, to me, at the time they were selling tons of printers. I mean, things changed obviously in that industry significantly, but it was quite an impressive thing to me to have somebody invested. But all of our clients do that. I mean, that's what the people, especially who've been with us for a lot of years, they stick through, they come back to us, they want us to run project after project because they see the value of what we're doing. And those are my favorites. The ones I don't like are the opposite. They come in, they don't want to be engaged to the test. They want us to be on autopilot. Are there any bugs? Okay, let's ship it. And those, I may love the product, but I'm disappointed that they're not investing in what we do. And that doesn't happen very often. Again, they're coming to us. They really do care. So that's really where, that's what comes down to be my favorites.
Chris, you've also been in the beta testing field for a while. Are you still, learning new things every time you get into a beta or working alongside someone? Or for you, is it more like, I've got the kind of the wide gamut, nailed down and understood by now?
I definitely get to deal with the different customers than Mike does. Mike has the big players that he's running through mostly. So I get a little more ground level with some startups and some new companies, and just not as say foundational as the ones that Mike has. And a lot of what I think the big standout is the interest in delivering the right process versus the best practice. So at Centercode, personally, I make a lot of recommendations on best practices, and I think I brought this up in one other podcast, but there's a right practice for right now, right? Like there's stuff that you can cut off and frills and stuff that you can kind of remove to just be able to make it to the next day, to make it to the next test, to kind of get through. So there's a lot of startups that I'm working with right now that I really enjoy their eagerness, because it's not a beta program manager. It's a CEO, it's an entrepreneur trying to get their product off the ground. And there's like, I want to listen to my customers, but I don't know where they are. I don't know how to get them. I'm doing a beta test because I want their feedback. And I love helping those people out because they need it. They need it to survive. These big companies need it to build great products and, continue their revenue streams and all that fun stuff. But some people are just getting started, and it's neat to see from my perspective.
Yeah. Interesting dichotomy there.
The mentalities. Yeah. It's interesting from that, juxtaposition, because somebody who's as big as, a giant shipping company that has hundreds of thousands of employees versus somebody who's a 4-person shop where it's the CEO and all that. We think there's a lot of difference in those two. And there are obviously in execution and resources, but at the same time, their motivations are almost the same, though, in terms of like they do care about what people have to say, and that's why they're there, and that's what makes this an important part of our work, is that they are listening.
Cool. Last question for you, Mike. I want to bring it all the way back to the beginning of the podcast, back to square one with Centercode. And you have had the opportunity to be here almost since day one. And I wanted to ask you, how has Centercode evolved over the years? What has changed? What has stayed the same? And what are you excited about, coming up next?
Wow, that's a real big question. A lot. That's the answer. A lot has changed. A lot of everything. So to try to, what has not changed is what we do is a commitment to delivering great feedback to customers. And that has always been at the core. And Luke's always been the biggest advocate of that, and, listening to customers. And, you guys know, he listens to us. He listens to everybody. He's a great listener. He's good at doing that. And that's part of the fabric of the company. And but I think the thing that I have just found such joy in over the changings and transition of the company, obviously the wonderful people that I get to work with and all the new people who come in and watching us grow, that's obviously awesome. When it was 5 of us sitting in a single office in San Clemente to, seeing over 50, 60 people, working here and having that is hugely rewarding. But what I think, and I know this is going to sound corny, but seeing the evolution of the software, when we started this business, the idea was we were going to be a software business with services offered. That hasn't changed. But what has changed is how much the software has evolved from being just this very simple but very powerful tool. Excuse me. One thing you guys didn't know is I wrote my own software for when I was at 3Com. I wrote all my own applications and all that. Yeah, so I wrote my own software. And then I saw what they were doing, and I was embarrassed to show them what I was doing. And they were echelons ahead of me. I mean, I was writing in an ASP and Cold Fusion, and I had all this stuff in the background, and I thought I was cool. And then I came and I flew down to San Clemente, and I sat down and I watched. I was like, wow, that was then. And if you look at what Centercode can do today with the integrations, with the ability to customization, with the every little thing, I know I sound like I'm being a sales guy here. I'm genuinely not. I genuinely love the evolution of our application. And every time, we introduced a new feature the other day on just having a dashboard of just so many things you can see about users on a single screen. And oh my God, that made me smile so much because it's like, click here. Now you go there, boom, it's right there in your face. I just was like, oh, this is so cool. and then we get, and then when one of my clients just has been using integration to a level that is unbelievable. They everything goes into their Jira, and it goes into their Slack channels, and it goes into their Teams, and they've got people coming in. They're pulling stuff from their own database in, so they know what products these people have. And I mean, it's incredible, and it just keep every time a new, and then just when I think, oh my gosh, then Luke will come to our team and sit down and goes, hey, look at the next thing I'm doing. I'm like, God, this is awesome. I got a whole new thing he's been working on, and then it just keeps every time he does it. And again, I don't want to sound like I'm blowing smoke, because I'm not. I genuinely think that's what keeps me excited. If our software was getting stagnant or I do love the work, but really when the tools keep getting there, I mean, we can talk about Ted all day. Ted's like my silent partner here. The best thing was the other day, someone invited Ted to a meeting. It was awesome.
We've heard stories about that in the past where people have sent packages to the office addressed to Ted. And it's like, what do we think about this? Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? I think it's a good thing because it shows how
if you watch
capable the tool is.
Times, it might be a bad thing, but yeah. I mean, it's awesome to see that our AI is getting invited to meetings that people have. I mean, think about that we developed something and built something that is so effectively done that people think it's a real person doing that job. And that's, and that's what excites me about why, obviously, I love what I do. So I'm not planning on going anywhere, but, it's what keeps me coming to work every day is the great new clients, the fun new products, and then having this tool that just every time a new build comes out, something's there that I didn't even think about. And that's one of the things that I think that is a testament to our longevity of being in this business for over 20 years is that we haven't just sat down and said, yeah, we make the best beta software in the world. And I am a little biased, but when you get into taking a look at what we've done with it, we're echelons ahead of anybody in terms of features, functionality, and that kind of thing. But it didn't, we could stop, but we don't. We just keep putting new stuff in. And that's what gets me excited about it. And that's what those changes over 20 years, every time I see something new, those kinds of things are what keep me excited and what keep me here and motivated to continue to just do this because I just, every day is, it never feels boring to me. And that's what's great.
Well, Mike, your passion for it is infectious, and the knowledge and wisdom that you shared today was incredible. I think we have so many, just great things to take away from this. So thank you for joining us. It was a real pleasure having you on the podcast.
You're You're very welcome, and I really enjoyed it. I like I could talk about beta all day long. So we can talk about this. We can do another 2 hours if you want to, because I can just talk about this stuff. I love it.
Thank you for listening to the Delta Huddle podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, leave us a like or a 5-star rating. You can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. We'll see you in the next episode, and happy testing.